everyone, welcome to another challenge video. This is for Clair stamps. I also am going to share with you how to do a little bit of simple masking and to fix mistakes. Now this challenge has a few different guidelines. The first one is to create a card or project using the photo below as inspiration. This is a gorgeous kind of palette this week that you have to work with. Also, you want to post your project and link to the Clair blog. Now, although we love to see Clair stamps whenever you're making your cards or projects for the challenge, any brand is acceptable. So keep that in mind whenever you make your projects too. Just make sure that you use that palette as inspiration. Also, the theme this month is techniques. So that's a fun one, and any technique will do. A few more things. You must link directly to the Clair Stamps blog. The project must be new. Don't backlink to an old project. The number of entries that you can enter is unlimited, so make as many cards or projects as you want, but add a direct link to the end links on the Clair blog for each individual post. And that will enter you in for a $25 gift card. Now, all prizes are always announced at the very end of the month, so this month will be on the 31st. Now for my card today, I'm using 3 Clair stamp sets. I'm using Hello Sentiments, Doodle Flowers, and Broken Brick background. I'm going to pair all of these together to create one card today. I'm starting off with this inside scalloped rectangle die cut. Any die cut will do here. I just want a nice frame. You could even use 2 rectangle dies to create a frame. I do that quite a bit. But for this one, it's not completely symmetrical all the way around. So I die cut with white cardstock, and then I'm going to flip both pieces over and mark both corners, the frame and the inside panel, with little numbers. That way I know exactly how to put it back together, and I'm not fussing around with it later on. Now on the inside panel with that white cardstock, I'm going to stamp the Broken Brick background. I'm inking that stamp up with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. I do not like to use my Misty for the background stamps. I find it easier actually to just peel off the paper that keeps the front side clean. Leave the backing paper on. You don't even need to take the stamp off of the backing paper. Ink it up with whatever ink you want to use. Now for this, I'm going to be doing heat embossing, so I did pre-treat my paper with an embossing bag. Then I'll lay that paper right down on top of the stamp and try not to move it. I'll place an extra piece of paper right over the top, and then with your hand or an acrylic block, I'm using a brayer here, just press that down onto this stamp. You kind of see that ink coming through the computer paper that I'm using to hold everything in place so I don't get ink all over my hands. So you know it's transferring onto the cardstock, and I'll lift that straight up and away from the background. It's a sticky kind of stamp, so it does get stuck a little bit and doesn't shift around, which really helps with the placement. And I've got this perfectly stamped background ready to go. I love doing it this way. It's so much easier. You don't have to worry about putting the stamp back on the backing paper. It really does make your life a lot easier. And I clean the stamp right there on the backing paper. I just wet it with a little bit of water from a spray bottle, or you could use stamp cleaner, whatever you want. just make sure it's safe for clear acrylic stamps, or clear photopolymer stamps, excuse me, and then I just wipe it down with a clean towel. Very simple and easy to do. So I did heat set that after I put on some clear embossing powder, because I'm going to be doing an emboss resist technique with distress inks. I am using Dusty Concord Hickory Smoke, and I'm actually pulling in a paper tray ink color, but this would be very similar to your like Victorian velvet color. I just don't have that one quite yet. So I just pulled out my PTI little ink cube and started blending with it. And it blended okay, but if you have distress inks, those work better. I'm using my mini ink blending tool to do the blending on this, and I'm just building up colors. I started off very soft, and then I'm just building. All these colors came from the inspiration photo I just pulled different colors from those photos that I thought worked well together, and then that's how I came up with my color palette. That's kind of why I like challenges like this. It pulls me out of my comfort zone with color combinations, so I'm not using the same ones. Like I use a rainbow order, or sometimes I use the blue and green and orange for my boy cards. So this switches it up a little bit for me. Now, once I'm done with the background, I'm going to go ahead and start stamping my little flower element. I'm using the Doodle flower stamp set, and there's this cluster of flowers that I'm going to go ahead and stamp down. I'm using the VersaFine Clair ink. I'm not doing any heat embossing. This just plays really, really well with all the coloring mediums, so it's kind of my go-to now. Plus it stamps beautifully. I know Memento works really well for the coloring medium that I'm going to be using today, which is colored pencils and OMS, but it does not give as clear and crisp of an impression as the VersaFine Clair. Plus, sometimes it kind of builds up on my stamps a little bit, kind of beads up, I guess you would say. So it doesn't always work out for me stamping with that. So I like to go with the VersaFine Clair because it does play well with so many mediums. You just need to remember to heat set it. I masked off that flower cluster right up above with a post-it note mask. I didn't even cut the whole thing out, just the bottom 2-3 flowers. Mask those off and then stamp the little jar. That way it looks like they're actually inside the jar. And there's a closer look at that masking. It's really super simple and easy to do. I just stamped it on a post-it note. I didn't even cut the whole thing out, and you got this beautiful masked image ready to go. It was really, really simple. Now, like I said, I'm using colored pencils and OMS for my coloring today. I'm using the Leisure Arts colored pencils. I really like these for very quick coloring. It's a nice color combination. I don't get overwhelmed by the colors. And again, I just pulled out colors that matched that inspiration photo from before. And then I very quickly colored in all the flowers. So I'm using some pinks and oranges. I have a little bit of a peach in there, a green for the little leaf, and very, very quickly blending this out with my OMS. Very simple and easy coloring. Now that mason jar that is underneath the flowers, normally you would color it in, or I would, I shouldn't say normally you would, but normally I would color it in blue. However, the inspiration photo kind of has a few grays in there, and I really want to pull in that gray from the background that I used, so I'm going to color it in gray. I used a little bit of colored pencil right around the edges, and I'm just going to continue to blend that and break that down with the OMS and blend it towards the center until I have a nice gradient wash. It looks very translucent this way when I keep the center very clean and crisp. And then it was time to stamp my sentiment. However, I forgot to stamp it beforehand before I stamped my background on. That was my whole plan, was to stamp my sentiment, mask it off. I even had the mask ready to go, but I got too excited about stamping the background, so I forgot to stamp it. So I had to figure out a way to put my sentiment down. I could have cut this out from cardstock, but I really didn't want that dimension with the sentiment. I wanted it to be more flat. So I started trying to ink it up. I placed it down where I knew it needed to be. Using my Misty, I'm going to stamp it down with some Versamark ink, and I'll heat emboss this. I heat embossed with black on the background, so I should have known that this wasn't going to work, but I went ahead and placed down some black sparkle embossing powder from WOW. So I put down that first layer, and the black on black just wasn't working, even with that added sparkle. But I thought maybe if I built it up, it would work a little bit better. So I'm using my Misty, and I can just insert my panel right back in, stamp back over it with the same Versamark ink. I am pre-treating every single time I go back in too, so I don't get extra powder anywhere. I added another layer right on top and did the heat embossing again, and you can just see from the video, you cannot really see what it says. So I grabbed out some silver embossing powder, my third layer. I went ahead and stamped it down again, added that silver embossing powder, heat set, and that one worked out so much better. And I think building up the layers actually helped, but even so, fixing that mistake, sometimes when you have so much work into a card, you just have to figure out how to fix a mishap you might have had in the beginning, rather than start completely over. I could have easily started this over, but I just don't have the time to really start it over, so I need to figure out workarounds for myself. I stamped from that Hello Sentiment so much onto a black piece of cardstock, heat embossed with that same silver embossing powder, and I just quickly cut that out into a rectangle. You could see from the photo, I just built it up, and then I'll use some dimensional adhesive on that later. Now for the frame, I'm popping it up on an A2 top folding card base that I'm using horizontally. I popped the frame up with a little bit of dimensional adhesive, inserted that background straight into it. I made sure I checked the numbers on the back too before I put everything down so it fit right. I put that down with regular adhesive, and then for the little flower, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of adhesive piecing. So on the left I have some plain adhesive so it fits to that frame, and then on the right I'll have a little bit of dimensional so it stays the same height as the frame, and I'll place that on the left hand side there. I also popped up that so much underneath the thanks with a little dimensional adhesive. To finish this card off, I am going to very quickly put on some silver Nuvo drops. Now these are a little thick, and I know a lot of people have trouble with getting that point on there. I do too. Just use a pen, like a straight pen that you would for sewing, and kind of after you pull away the thing, just kind of swirl that in that little tip, and it should even it out into a more rounded dimension. That works for me anyway. But once that was done, that finished off today's card for the Joy Clair Stamps August Challenge. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and a look at how I fixed a few of my mistakes and also that emboss resist technique. That does it for me today. If you enjoyed this video, you can click the like button down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can do that on the left hand side as well. There are also a few different links to different videos if you want to watch some more today. So thanks for watching and happy crafting.